Hi there, here we are again. How are you going with drawing your sandal? In the last two modules, I demonstrated the process I used to build a drawing. Each new process has added another layer of dimension and complexity to our drawing. Now we will start to really build our assets in this module. Not all will necessarily be appropriate for this sandal, but at the very least you will have the start to an asset library of brushes, trims and gradient swatches that simulate metals. In this module, I will give you a comprehensive overview of the different brush types and how and when to use them. So, without any further rambling, let's get on with this. I'll first open a new file and turn this into my assets library. Here in the menu bar, I'll go to File, New, and I'll create a file with 8x A4 artboards. Each one will be for a different category of trim, brush and swatch. Some of my trims will go into the symbol library and some will be art brushes. I'll just drag my swatches panel, brush panel and gradient panel out from the other docked panels, as we will be working extensively with these in this module. I'll retrieve my saved brush library and swatch library and load them into the swatch and brush panel for this file. Before I go further, let me talk to you about gradient swatches and the panel, as I will be using this throughout this module. I'll just draw a rectangle quickly and fill it with the default gradient from the gradient panel. This is a black and white linear gradient. Over here, I can change this to radial if I wish. I will start with the linear gradient. Here you can change the angle of the gradient, so 45 degrees as I have just done. Or with the radial, when I change the aspect ratio, the roundness of the radial, I can also change the angle it sits at, but it will always radiate from the center of the object. Now, let me go to the Swatches panel library and open a gradient library. I'll go to Swatch Libraries, Open Swatch Library, Gradients, and choose Metals. I'll select one of these swatches and demonstrate how to change and add colors to a gradient. I've selected a gold linear swatch, and I'll remove some colors and change others. Have a look at how I can move the slider under the bar. This changes how much and where the color is in the gradient. If I double-click on the gradient slider, I can adjust the color by selecting this artist palette here, or change the color by selecting the Swatches panel symbol here. I can remove a color by selecting the slider and then delete it by selecting the bin here. I can add a new color by resting my cursor under the bar, and when the addition symbol appears, I click and a new gradient slider will appear. I can adjust the softness or sharpness of the transition between colors by adjusting the midpoints at the top of the gradient bar. Once you're happy with the new gradient, simply add a new color swatch to the Swatches panel and name it something appropriate. Now, I'll go through the different types of brushes we can create and when to use them. When I first select to create a new brush, a dialog box appears, giving me the choice between 5 brushes: calligraphic brush, scatter brush, art brush, bristle brush, and pattern brush. This is the one you'll be familiar with now. Both the calligraphic and bristle brushes do not serve our purposes in this course. There are tons of varieties of these in the available brush libraries. I'll concentrate on the remaining 3, the art, scatter, and pattern brushes. the scatter brush for things that are a little random, and I can scatter them with random sizes and distances, as I have done with the jewel here. Or it can be used for something that overlaps, like sequins. The art brush is good to use when you have trims that need to curve along a path, like the classic Gucci trim. You are already familiar with the pattern brush. Here I will also demonstrate how to create your own start and end tiles, as well as how to use a brush within a brush. You will recall that I set you a challenge at the end of the last lesson. I suggested that you create your own 2-needle brush and a brogue pattern brush. How did you go with that? Let me demonstrate how I go about this. So I'll just drag the 1-needle brush I created from the brushes panel and delete the corner tiles. All tiles will be grouped together, so use the group selection tool. You will see when I select the side tile, it has a transparent box around it. Delete this with the direct selection or group selection tool as well. Now all you will need to do is copy the stitch line once vertically. I'll do my keyboard increment at 0.5 millimeters. I'll then create this brush with exactly the same options as the 1-needle brush. I select the lines I've just drawn and click onto the New Brush button, or you can go to the drop-down menu on the side of the panel and select New Brush if you prefer that. A dialog box will open and I will select Pattern Brush. Once the pattern brush options come up, the brush I've just created appears in the second tile from the left. I first name this brush 2-needle top stitch. I'll leave the scale as fixed and the spacing at 0%. In the first tile, I'll click onto the drop-down arrow to reveal the corner options. I'll select the auto-centered option. I'll do this for the third tile too, the inner corner. At this point, I do not select any of the flip options. In Fit, I select Stretch to Fit. Now for the important part, colorization. Here in Method, I'll select Hue Shift. Once that is done, select OK to save the new brush in the panel. So as you can see, I've saved myself a bit of time by using the 1-needle brush. The brogue brush works on a similar principle to the pinked edge brush with a repeat. I'll first draw a square to contain the repeat, and to guide me, I'll make this 3mm square with a bright fill. I'll then draw a circle to sit in the middle of this square with some space around it, so about 1.5mm circumference, or if you prefer, 1.5mm high and 1.5mm wide. I'll draw a smaller circle, 0.6mm, and copy this once. Mine are a millimeter apart. I'll horizontal center align these, group them, and then line them up with the edge of the square. Now I'll copy these horizontally to the other side of the square. So a 3mm keyboard increment, and then I press the Alt key and the horizontal arrow to the right. I'll group the 4 smaller circles together and select all components and horizontal and vertical center align them. The side tile is now complete. Make a copy of all components and delete the small circles. This will be for the start and end tiles. Group each of the tile's components together and remove the fill from the background square. I'll create the brogue pattern brush and have none in both corner options, as these distort too much. I'll select the Start tile and start to drag it to the Brushes panel. When I just hover over the Brushes panel, an addition symbol appears. I don't release the mouse button just yet, as this will create a whole new brush. I'll press the Alt key down now, and you can see the Start tile space highlighted with a black box around it. I'm releasing the mouse button before I release the Alt key. I'll do the same for the End tile. So, those are the two practice brushes. How did you go?